So being on dialysis, many of us get asked by people that are getting ready to be faced with going on dialysis, which type do we do and which do we recommend or prefer? And since I have done both types, I thought I would talk about that today. Hey guys, it's Natalie with Living the Oil Life. Welcome to my channel. This is where I love to share things that I learn about using essential oils and oil-infused products in my everyday life. And since dialysis is part of my everyday life and my oily life and my dialysis life are intertwined, I like to share about that on here also. And today, like I said, we often get asked about what type of dialysis we do. Now, to back up, if you don't know what dialysis is, in a nutshell, it is where your kidneys no longer function enough to get the toxics and the toxins and the waste product and the fluid out of your body well enough. And so you have to do dialysis, which basically does that for you. And if you want to learn more about my story on how I had to start dialysis, you can check that out in the link there, or I'll try to put the link below. It's just a synopsis of how I ended up on dialysis and my journey there. But like I said, I have done both types of dialysis. Now, dialysis, like I said, helps to remove the toxins and the waste and the fluid out of your body. And why that is important is because we know toxins will build up into your body and can wreak havoc on it. And also waste products that we don't use all the time, such as phosphorus and potassium, even though we need those to live, if they stay in our system and build up in our system, that can damage us also. So that has to be removed to keep us balanced and healthy. And then also the liquid, many of us do not pee like the rest of the world. And so our fluid gets built up, which we know is bad for our breathing and bad for our heart and just bad in general. And so the dialysis takes that off. And there's two types of dialysis. One is hemodialysis and the other is peritoneal dialysis. And hemodialysis is basically where you get hooked up to a big machine or a little machine, depends on what type you're doing, but you get hooked up to a machine, and by a vascular access, which I will talk about in another video because that's a whole nother subject, but by a vascular access, usually 2 needles, that's how I do it. The blood goes through the tubing, through an artificial kidney, which I'll picture here. An artificial kidney. The artificial kidney cleans out the toxins and the waste and gets rid of the extra fluid, and it goes through and gets pumped back into your system. So that in itself is a hard process for your body to take. But hemodialysis, you usually do it 3 times a week. Usually, the average person usually does it 3 times a week. And you usually do it depending on your size, depending on other things that may be going on with you physically. You usually do it from either 3 to 4, sometimes 5 if you're a very larger person, sometimes 5 hours each treatment. So on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I go to the dialysis unit and I dialyze for 3.5 hours. To me, it's like having a part-time job that you don't get paid for. You actually have to pay for it. But you do it that way. You sit in a clinic. You can do it in a clinic, or you can be trained to do it at home, which I have never even considered that option. Number one, because you need to have a support person at home, which I live by myself. And number two, you have to stick those Mama Jamma needles in your arms yourself or your legs, wherever your access is. I used to have to give myself what they were called epigen shots before, and they were like teeny tiny skinny needles, and hemo needles are extremely large, but there was no way that I was going to do those. So hemodialysis in a nutshell is where you go into a clinic or you have a setup at home and you do it at least 3 times a week. to help get the toxins out of your body. There's a lot of technicians, there's nurses, your doctor comes in to see you at least every other, ours usually comes in at least every other week, and then they do monthly rounds where they discuss all of your labs and things like that. So they take care of all of that. And in our unit, we have about, on our shift, I do the morning shift, so I am there. I'm on the machine by 5:45, and I usually get done. I'm usually out the door by like 10 o'clock, 10:15, because you have to allow to getting stuck and then holding your sites and things like that. And so I'm usually there 4 hours, I guess you could say, total. And I forgot what I was saying. Oh, and so our unit in our shift usually has about 20 dialysis chairs, I want to say. So that is how many people are in a room. It can be a little bit noisy because people are talking, TVs are going and things like that. But I usually am able to fall asleep because what happens is I get there and I'm good and I've got my iPad and I'm going to try to get some stuff done. But because your blood is being constantly pulled out of your body, like constantly, it is outside of your body. And so it makes you tired. And so I end up falling asleep at least for a couple of hours, but it's not a good sleep because like I said, all of the noise and everything going around. But that's hemodialysis in a nutshell. And then peritoneal dialysis is where you have a catheter placed in your abdomen, and your peritoneum, which is a lining around all your organs, it acts as basically your kidney kind of thing. That's the best way that I can describe it, because what happens is you have a solution which is called a dialysate solution, which I believe it's a lot of I'm not quite sure what it is, so I'm not gonna say that, but it's like a huge IV bag, and you infuse yourself with this fluid. The fluid stays in your belly for at least 3 to 4 hours. And then what happens is your peritoneum acts like the membrane, and it pulls the toxins through your body and the extra fluid with the dialysate, which I think is a pretty cool thing. And like I said, I did that one. Your catheter is usually around the belly button region, maybe a little bit lower, somewhere around there. It's low enough so that the fluid can all drain out, and the tube goes in, the catheter goes in, and then there's another tube that lays in there so that the fluid can flow out. And when I did it, it's been years since I've done it, but when I did it, I would do 3 exchanges a day, and then I would go to sleep and be hooked up to my machine that was right by my bed at night, and it would continually cycle that way. Now, you do the exchanges, like I said, but you're not sticking yourself with the needle every time. You already have the catheter in there. So it's a permanent catheter that lays in your belly, and you do the dialysis that way. I hope this makes sense. Make sure you Google it if you're not quite sure. But the whole reason I wanted to do this was to give you my experience on both, since I've done both. And so with peritoneal dialysis, for me, since you're doing it every day, a couple of times a day, you feel so much better than you do on hemodialysis. Hemodialysis, you're only doing it 3 times a week, so the toxins that are building up in your body in between them, and then you're pulling it off every other day. It's a little harsher on your body. Your blood pressure fluctuates a lot more on hemodialysis, so that's hard on your body. To me, hemo is just a harder way to do dialysis. It's the same thing. You get the same results. You're cleaning your blood, but for me, it's a little bit harsher on the body. But some people can't do peritoneal, which I can't do it anymore because I ended up getting a lot of scar tissue in my belly from different surgeries and things like that. And so my clearance level wasn't as good on PD. So I had to switch to hemo. If I could do PD, I would do it again in a heartbeat. So with PD, you get a whole wall full of product. You get boxes that have the dialysis solution and your tubings and things like that. And basically what you do is you hook up the dialysate, it runs into your belly, you throw all that away, and then when it's time to exchange, you hook up again and you release all of that into another bag, an empty bag that goes on the floor. You empty that, you put the new fluid in, and then you empty the yucky stuff, because it's basically like your pee in a bag, and you dump that in the toilet and throw your stuff away, and that's it, and you're good to go. Now, I did work on, while I was on hemodialysis, and I had a great room that was specifically, well, not specifically, but a great room that I could go into and do my exchange, because an exchange only takes maybe 15 to 20 minutes, but you have to be in an environment that people aren't breathing on you and there isn't stuff flowing out in there. So it's not something that you want to do like out in the middle of a field or anything like that. You want to be careful. You want to be careful when you have animals around you, cats and dogs. You don't want them in the room while you're doing it, because their fur and dander and stuff like that can get into it. It has to be, you have to be really, really careful. Now, the pros for hemodialysis, there's not a lot to me personally, but the pros are that you do only do it 3 times a week. So it's not PD where you're doing it every single day, several times a day. You only have to do it 3 times a week. The pro is that you're surrounded by not doctors, but technicians and nurses all the time. That's a pro to me, because if I'm not feeling good one morning, then I can go in and say, hey, I'm not feeling really good. What can be going on? That kind of thing. You get your blood tested every week and then monthly, so you don't have to go to an extra doctor for that. That's about the only pros that I can think of with hemo. And of course, I'm getting my blood cleaned and I'm staying alive. The cons, of course, is you're getting stuck twice, 3 times a day. 3 times a week, and then you have your pretty dialysis arm, which I'm doing a video on that because somebody asked me about that, which isn't fun. And then the other con is that a lot of times you don't know how you're going to feel after dialysis. Some days I feel really good, and then some days I'm like, I have to go home and take a nap. So that's hard. That's a con, definitely. The other con is that you have to go 3 times a week, and sometimes 3.5 hours. I'm very blessed in that I only have to do 3.5 hours. There's guys that are there with me that are there for 4.5. I think there's 2 that are there for 5 hours. So that's a big con. The other con with hemo, I really can't think of any other really big con. For me, it's hemo. I have to do it. It's my lifeline. If I don't do it, I'm not here. So I don't have a choice. Now, the pros with peritoneal dialysis is you feel so much better. Now, this was just my experience with it. I know everybody's experience is different. Everybody is going to have a different story. But for me, the pro was I was home, and I felt so much better. My fluid restriction and my food restriction wasn't as strict, so that was good. I could travel a lot better with it. I would just have my things shipped ahead of time, so when I got there, everything was already there. So even though it was a little more planning, I still could travel a lot easier with it. I even went on a cruise with PD, so that was fun. And I went to Mexico. My parents had a timeshare, so I was able to go down there on peritoneal. So for me, traveling was a lot better. For some reason, I don't know why. Another pro is it's more flexible. So if you're running late, an hour, in between your schedule isn't going to hurt you, but you're doing it every day and you're doing it constantly. So that was a good thing. Con of peritoneal would be you have to do it several times a day. So yes, it does cut into your day, but it is doable. It is very doable. Like I said, it only takes like 20 minutes. So it's doable for me. And when I had my daughter, was younger, it was really great for me because I was able to stay home with her and not have to worry about going to dialysis on hemo, which she did end up going with me several times, more than several times when I was on hemo. She would go and sit in the chair next to me, but you can't do that nowadays. But she did. And then the other con is the supplies. You have a ton of supplies, so you either have to have a room that you dedicate for it, or you don't mind having the boxes all sitting out in a room. You can make it pretty, you know, you can cover it and things like that, but that can be a con. And then that's the only really con that, oh, and you also have a catheter that's sticking out of your belly 24/7, and you have to be really, really, really careful with it. You can't take long baths. You can't go into, well, you can go into the ocean if you prepare it right, and if you cover it with waterproof tape. They do say that you can. Some people don't. You can't go in hot tubs, stuff like that. So those are the differences between hemo and peritoneal dialysis. I hope it explained it a little bit. I know that people, when they're first having to think about starting dialysis, it kind of freaks them out and they want to hear somebody else's opinion. So that's why I did this. If you have any questions, if you want to learn more about my story, just message me or comment below and I will be more than happy to talk to you. I have several people that they message me every once in a while and say, hey, this is going on. What would you do? Or what do you think? I am not a doctor. I have to say that. I forgot to say that at the beginning, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to tell you what to do. That is between you and your doctor, your nurse practitioner, and your medical care team. But I am here to say you have choices, and dialysis is not, I want to say dialysis isn't life or death, but it is life or death, because if you don't do dialysis, you're going to die. But it's not the end of the world. It really is not the end of the world. Hemo is scary. At first, it really is scary, and sometimes it can still be scary because I'm just, you know, medical things, you just never know what's going to happen. So it can be scary, but it's doable. It's very doable, and you get used to it, you learn, you grow. But the biggest thing that I can always say to somebody getting ready to be on dialysis is you are your own advocate. You are your strongest advocate. So you make sure you ask a ton of questions. Don't just take their word for it. Ask questions again and again and again, and you have the final say in what you do. Remember that. So that's it for today. I hope this helps somebody. Please feel free to share it with other people that you may know that are dealing with dialysis. There's a shareable link down below, or just click on the share button. You can share it however you want. And I think that's it. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.